Welcome back to the Resolve Podcast, where we talk through biblical truths that help us become resolved to live well. We're going to continue this conversation about stewardship of resources that God has given us. And if you missed the last episode, please go back and listen to that. And we framed the whole idea of what a steward is. And there's some really good, important nuggets in there, I think, that will be helpful for all of us to understand. It was great just to revisit that information again, too. So please go back and watch that one. We're going to build off of this one. But today, we're really looking at the practical side of stewardship. We're going to help and really explore managing money, guarding our hearts, giving wisely, creating plans, and living generously through a life of discipline and intentionality. So really kind of the main things we're talking about is managing God's money, as we talked about stewardship. 4 basic money categories. We'll talk about this idea of right side up living. 3 keys: look ahead, budget, live it. And then living in disciples who steward the deposit entrusted to us. Some really good key things. Josh, anything you want to tell us before we dive into this one?
Yeah, there are just a couple of things I would say as we get started. One, if you do get the chance to go back and listen to that last one, really that Proverbs 4 passage that shows us and teaches us to guard our hearts, that's so important because our hearts can so quickly become idol factories. And so we want to keep our feet walking in the right direction as we keep our eyes pointed straight ahead. The second thing I would just say is we are not offering financial advice as financial advisors. So that's not us.
Yeah, we are pastors. We are not financial advisors. We do look at finances and things from a biblical worldview, and we do our best to steward those things well. But no, we are not in finance. So, these concepts will be rooted in Scripture. So,
absolutely,
let's dive into it.
All right. So, what I love about this is thinking about it this way. And again, this plays off what we talked about last week. We're stewards, not owners, of everything that we have.
Right.
Which means, as we talk about managing money, if you could change this small piece of how you say it, I think it will change your perspective. You're not just managing your money, you're managing God's money. And so when you think about your own home, you're managing God's money. So when
that's kind of awkward for us to say out loud, and maybe even uncomfortable because we like having stuff.
Right.
We like owning things. It's ingrained into who we are as a culture, but man, it is radically different to say this is all God's, not from like the cliche statement, all I have is the Lord's, but like, no, literally.
Yeah.
Everything you own, you don't actually own.
See,
everything you have is what God owns.
Yeah. And I think you look back into the Old Testament, and this was easier for them to understand for 2 reasons. One is it came from the ground. They were plowing the ground, they were growing things, which then became products that they would sell. So there's this connection to, I'm dependent on God for this. This is His blessing in my life. The second piece of that was, notice if you've ever read Levitical laws, all of that, why does God have them do all these things about the first fruits of their grape harvest, the first fruits of their grain harvest, the first fruits of their sheep and cattle and all of that? Why? Because every bit of what you had, your mind reconnected that back to this really is God's.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy for us to not see that connection as clearly.
I agree, because we have manufactured things.
Right.
There's a lot more process involved.
Yeah.
We are, in our human development, less dependent on these things, the weather patterns and all those things to produce those things perfectly. We figured out really good irrigation methods, all those different things, and that's why it's harder for us to understand and really draw that same comparison.
Yeah, and by the way, let me throw this out there as well. To an extent, not fully, but to an extent, when you look at Old Testament generosity, there are a couple passages that make it very public, and here's what I mean. It says, "Don't harvest the corners of your field, leave it for the sojourner and the poor in your midst." When you think about that, if you were to think about your wealth, if you will, as a field, how big are your corners? How much are you harvesting for yourself or how much are you leaving for the purposes of God? And that's a great picture because in that day and time, your generosity was on display.
Yep.
That's why you go back to a book like Ruth and you see how many people were gleaning in Boaz's field. It's because he was such a generous man.
Yeah.
He left so much of it there for those who were sojourners and the poor to glean from his field. So just even in that picture, but yeah.
That's good. All right. Proverbs 27, verses 23 through 27. They say, know well the condition of your flocks and give attention to your herds, for riches do not last forever. And does a crown endure to all generations? When the grass is gone and the new growth appears and the vegetation of the mountains is gathered, the lambs will provide your clothing and the goats the price of a field. There will be enough goat's milk for your food, for the food of your household and the maintenance of your girls.
I love this passage. It sounds so funny, especially
it is kind of a funny thing.
You
for
get
us to
to
read.
the end of it, and it's like it'll provide for the maintenance of your girls. And if you've ever had girls, you know there's maintenance. And so now there's maintenance with guys too. Don't get me wrong. There's expense in every kid that
What are
you
you talking
have.
about? I got a 3-for-1 soap, man. Got it all in one thing.
So yes, there's what I love about this passage though is when you begin to dig into what it's saying. Verse 23, that first verse, know well the condition of your flocks and give attention to your herds. What is he saying there? What he's saying is, do you know what you have and what you don't have? So from a very practical biblical perspective, I love the way, I believe it was Dave Ramsey put this, if you don't give your dollar or every dollar you have a name, someone else will.
Yep.
Which means if you don't put it somewhere with intentionality, there's going to be the next commercial or the next email or the next thing that's going to say, hey, spend your money here, and you're likely to do it because you haven't told it where it's going to go yet. And so do you know what you have? Like, have you ever really sat down and said, oh, this is what I make every month? How are we budgeting that? We'll get to budgeting in just a moment, but you got to know what you have and what you don't have to begin with. Well, then it goes into the next verse. It says, for riches don't last forever, and does a crown endure to all generations? And the reality of that is seasons of life are quick. You even get that in the next verse where the grass is gone and then the new growth appears, vegetation is gathered, all of that. The seasons of life. And here's what I would think is a really biblical principle from that. What changes do you need to think about today because you realize it's not always going to be like this? Some days, maybe from now, you're going to make more in terms of the amount of money you're able to make through a job or career. For some, maybe it's less in 10 years. Maybe you've retired. What do you need to think about thinking 10, 15, 20 years into the future of what that's going to look like? So not only do you know what you have today and what you don't have, but realizing seasons of life are quick. So what do you need to think about for the future? And then you get in this next one. When the grass is gone and the new growth appears and the vegetation of the mountains is gathered, the lambs will provide your clothing and the goats the price of a field. What's embedded in there, what we sometimes don't realize, is there's a lot of work that happens to get the grass, the vegetation. You have got to walk the sheep, the lambs up there, the goats. They've got to eat. You've got to harvest what the goats provide, which is milk, which is sometimes food, which is all kinds of things in their existence as those animals. You've got to see that the next generation of animals are going to come from them.
Right.
So there's a lot of hard work, and that's really what it's saying. Work hard and work wisely in the seasons of your life. And then the last one, it says this, that last couple of verses, so the lambs provide your clothing, the goats provide the price of a field. There you will have enough goat's milk for your food and the food of your household and the maintenance of your girls. And essentially it's this, God provides what we need. And you sense that in there, that you're dependent upon the grass growing from God's provision. So as you work hard wisely, as you think about the seasons of life and the changes you need to make, and you realize what you have and what you don't have, trusting all that to the Lord, and He'll provide what you need.
Absolutely. So what are, how can people grow in financial awareness? You said keep stock of your goats. I don't have any goats. There are days I wish I did.
Yeah, they're good from on the yard, I hear.
Yeah, but so what does that like? What does that really mean?
Yeah, so for us in our time, so it starts, I think, with do you have a job? Are you making, is there income that's coming in on a regular basis? What does that income look like? You'd be surprised to know how many people have no idea how much money they make every month or every 2 weeks, however you're paid, twice a month, whatever that may be. So to know, okay, this is about how much money I make. Now, sometimes people, if you're a real estate person, can be more challenging because the sales don't always come in exact order, that you can't budget in that same way, but you get a general idea, okay, the last 6 months, the last year. So you get an idea of what you have. Then there's assets that come alongside that as well. So you have a home. Do you have cars? Do you have insurance? Do you have all of these? Not that insurance is an asset, but do you have all of these things that you now have to plan for as well? Because all of those things are great, but they're all going to cost money as well. So you begin to kind of get this idea of your financial picture, if you will.
And it takes time to just, sit down and think about that.
It does take time.
There's a stewardship piece of that, as we know what we're actually dealing with.
And it's easy to get, and sometimes this happens to generations. Sometimes it's different for different generations. What I mean by this, it's easy to lose track of things if you don't stay on top of it.
Are you getting on to me about bouncing a checkbook again?
No,
we've had this conversation before.
No, not so much. But here's where I think people lose it. There are entire companies, and you know this, we've had this conversation. There are entire companies that now are built on simply looking at your bank account and identifying how many monthly subscriptions you have.
Yeah.
And then will help you cancel those subscriptions.
And I'm like,
but that's a reality that some people are like, I'm going to sign up for this. And the intention is a month from now, I'm going to cancel this subscription. And then you never do. And so you've got $8 here, $20 here, $10 here. And all of a sudden, hundreds of dollars are flowing out every month. And you're like, why don't we have enough for groceries? Well, because you got every streaming service under the sun. So thinking about all of those different things, what does it take for that full financial picture to take shape?
So let's put that into 4 basic money categories.
Yep.
If we had a piece of pie, we would slice it how Logan would like to slice pie. 45% for me. No, I'm kidding.
There you go.
So we're going to put this in 4 different categories. And the categories are give, save, debt, and lifestyle.
Yeah.
And those are not equal proportions.
Correct.
But let's walk through these 4 basic money categories and why they matter.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the categories are good. The percentages, I'll put it this way. Some I would encourage more standard. Others, they're going to give from time to time. And here's what I mean by that. A general rule of thumb, and again, I'm going to say this very clearly, we are not financial advisors, but a general rule of thumb is the very first category is giving. So this is biblical. The Lord calls us to resource his kingdom through the local church to give so that the kingdom of God goes forward. Old Testament, it's called tithing, but by the way, before the law of the Old Testament, there was also tithing. When you go back into Genesis, from that time, it's even just called generous giving and support in the New Testament in those ways. So the tithe, which literally means 10%, is a great threshold marker. And what I mean by that threshold is, for whatever reason, the way our hearts are often wired, when you release with open hands 10% of what you bring in and give that back to the local church, it is like a release of recognizing this really is God's. It's almost like pulling our hands apart and going, no, Lord, this really is yours. And there's something about that 10% threshold. So that's the idea of the tithe there. So 10%, that first category, would go to kingdom work in the local church. 10% then would go towards saving. And so why would you save? Well, to be a steward of God's money. Now, there are some who are going to recommend 15%, some who are going to recommend even more than that in terms of retirement and all that stuff. When we say saving, this is more long-term saving that you are anticipating one day you're not going to either have the ability to or the desire to work in the same way that you do now in terms of earning potential. So instead of putting that weight on your kids and how they're going to provide for you, saving enough so that in those years you can continue to be someone who's generous and a blessing to others. So that's a piece of the long-term saving. There's a short-term saving, which also is just unanticipated expenses that come up or anticipated expenses. If you have a house, your air conditioner is going to wear out at some point in Texas. If you have cars, As much as they're maybe newer today, they're going to wear out, right? All that's going to take place. And yet sometimes we live like it never will. We live like, I'm sure my car's going to be fine. It's never going to cost X amount. And then you go to the service place and it's $1,000 and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, it's going to happen to all of us for all the cars. So you have to look at that in the saving piece of it. And I want to say something else with that. You do, for some personality-wise, have to fight the hoarding temptation, where it's like, I tend to think the other shoe is always going to drop. There's always going to be bad. And so I'm going to set aside so much that it actually inhibits me from living today. And so there's a danger to that side. So then the third category is debt. And debt is what you owe to others. So that's the basic definition of debt. So there's good debt and there's bad debt. Good debt is often debt that is growing or debt that's allowing you to be able to function, if that makes sense. So a house is good debt. A car. Now, I know this is where Dave Ramsey might disagree with me. I think
we're not financial advisors.
Again, we're not financial advisors. And I think finding a car within your means, it's a whole nother discussion and all that. But if you live in Texas, it's very hard to find a job and not have a car. It's very hard to get around in life and not have a vehicle. So that may be, and I'm not saying it is for you.
I'm still shocked there's this thing called public transportation.
Yeah, not to most of our homes, there's not.
There are people that don't own a car.
There are.
It doesn't make sense to me.
I mean, you could Uber everywhere.
They don't live here in Texas. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So that may be something obviously you have to do. But assessing those risks, assessing those things of your life and going, okay, good debt, bad debt. I can pretty much tell you without a doubt, credit card debt is bad debt.
Absolutely. 100% every single time.
So, and where we get ourselves into trouble is the next, promotional period or the next thing that's 0% interest at this store or this place, and with all intentions of paying it off, and then we don't. And debt becomes incredibly oppressive.
It's crushing.
Yeah.
I mean, to think about paying 25% on interest on something.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the category of debt. So then you have the category of lifestyle. That's living on the rest. So that's enjoying life. And there's nothing wrong with an enjoyment of life under God's direction and clarity, under a biblical realization of what that looks like. So even go to Ecclesiastes and other places where the scripture encourages us to enjoy this life that God's given us. Go on a good vacation with your family. Enjoy a trip. Enjoy the life that God's given you in the day-to-day. Go to the games and sporting events and fun things and all of that. Now, all that can absolutely go to excess. Mm-hmm. But that's a category of it, lifestyle, and that's life. Also, there's food in there and just all those kinds of things.
Our risk is when we take the lifestyle and we put that first. And that's what we're actually going to talk about, right side up living. It's a concept we talked about in the introduction here. But upside down living is one that starts with lifestyle, and then it affects pretty negatively every other aspect of those four basic categories.
Yeah.
Right? When our lifestyle drives our finances, debt usually inflates like crazy, savings significantly decrease, and giving is the first thing to go.
Yeah.
Like giving 10%, I can't do that. I'm paying 25% on the debt that I have right now. How can I even get there?
Right.
But that's when we live with a lifestyle priority first, and that's upside down living. Whereas right side up living is the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Walk us through what right side up living looks like.
Yeah, so right side up living is you begin with giving, and that's biblical, the first fruits. You begin with giving to your local church. So,
and listen, God doesn't need your stuff. Absolutely does not.
Yeah.
The giving is because of our hearts.
Absolutely.
The giving is a relationship that God draws us into to say, God, you are king, or as Pastor Jared says to my kids all the time, God's the boss.
Yeah.
Right? He's the one that's in charge. I trust you to do it.
Yeah.
It's a surrender point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we begin there. And by the way, I love the way you said that. It's a surrender point. It's us surrendering to the fact that this is all God's. And it sets the priority. And so, by the way, I would say make that an act of literal worship in your family. Even if you give electronically, which most of us do, celebrate that, worship that, hey, we get to give to eternal purposes every single paycheck, right? We get to give to that. When your kids get jobs, I remember our kids, when they first started earning dollars, of, hey, wanting to give 10% to the church. And what a gift that is, that they see that, because you start there. So step 2 then really is debt. I'm sorry, step 2 is...
Wrong.
Yeah, my bad.
This is why you're not a financial
there
advisor.
You go. That's why I'm not an advisor. Giving, then you go to saving. Step 2 is saving, because again, if you don't start with those places, it's easy not to get there. Way too easy. And so you start saving for retirement, saving for that rainy day fund, all of those things. If you're like, hey, listen, I'm so extended, I don't even know how to begin that. There are great courses. Dave Ramsey is a great resource to turn to, as well as others out there. But next is that saving piece. Then you get to evaluate debt.
Yep.
And this is a point not where you get to take on a lot of debt, but evaluate where your debt load is.
And the debt with the goal with that is to get out of it
Yes.
at some point, right? We take on a mortgage not with the intent to like, I'm going to be paying this for the next 50-year mortgages, man. I'm sorry. I don't want to go down that, but like, whoa.
Yeah.
But the goal, if you have to take on debt, is to not be buried under that for a long term.
Yeah.
That is, what can we do to be free of that so that more of our resources are available?
Yeah, absolutely. And so then you have to evaluate that. How much of a percentage can we handle realistically, by the way, not only for today, but thinking about 10, 15 years from now, or at least 5 years from now, how much can we handle that and still be able to live, and live in a way that's helpful? Because you've already dealt with, we're going to give, we're going to save. Okay, so now you evaluate your debt. So that step 4 then is finally live within your means. And that means that lifestyle piece adjusts to where you are, with what's left of that. So the beautiful part of that is you don't get yourself in what's called this luxury trap, which is, I'm just going to spend because I want more. And then where more goes next is, now I have all this stuff, I don't need more. Now I need better things. So instead of the generic car brand, I need the luxury model, right? And so I'm going to spend even more there to get better. And then it becomes unique. So instead of that, now I need the McLaren, right? If you're just picking on the cars, or the renovations of the house and all of that stuff. And all of a sudden our lifestyle drives, as opposed to our worship of the Lord and how He's wired us to give first, then save, and then we would evaluate the debt and then live on what's left and not get ourselves. And enjoy
that. Yes.
Yeah. And enjoy that and realize that.
And that, man, I just want to talk about that for a second, because there is freedom to enjoy those things when your lifestyle is aligned correctly.
Yeah.
There's no guilt, because, as we'll talk about in a second, there's a budget, and there is freedom in a budget.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Absolutely.
Budgets sound like a bunch of rules, but man, when you look at your budget and you say, we have allocated this much of our budget for fun. Yeah. Guilt-free fun.
Yeah. And you get to enjoy it.
Have fun.
Yeah. And to realize that where we often go, especially in our culture now, it's less about accumulating stuff and it's more about accumulating experiences. And experiences cost money. And yet you watch the YouTubers, you watch all of that, and it's just like all of these amazing experiences that there's this one YouTuber that I've been exposed to because of kids in my home, and they almost get to the end of every single episode saying, you really need to experience this. Like that's what, and you're thinking, you do this for a living and your whole life is experiences so that you get other people, like it's a trap. And I don't think they mean poorly by it, but that's the deal, is that you get in this category of trying to keep up with whoever, and you don't have to. That's not where the joy in life is found. I was listening to a sermon today. I'll pause after this, but and the guy who was preaching, famous, well-known guy, love his messages, but he was talking about growing up, his grandfather used to take him on these like times where they just get away, he and his grandpa. It was like a day trip. And he said it was so simple. They would get on the bus, because his grandpa, I don't think, had a vehicle. and they would ride the bus to different stops along the bus route. They would just pick one. And then like he would bring snacks. And then like they might find a 7-story building in this town, and they would just go up to it, look over it, and go back down and ride the bus back home. And he was like, he said the guy preaching was like, I didn't care about what we did. I cared about who I was with.
Yep.
And that's such a good reminder.
Yep. That's so good. So there are 3 keys that I think are important for us to talk through as we talk about wise stewardship. And the first thing is to look ahead.
Yeah.
Right? It means more than just anticipating expenses. It's talking about being intentional with God's kingdom. So talk about that, and we'll go into the next one after.
Yeah. So to think about, have you ever asked the Lord for what dreams he has for your life? And what do you want it to, like, how do you want to serve him? Let's put it this way, even just one example. Do you want to go on a mission trip one day? Yeah. Right? And well, that requires dollars. And anytime one's announced in the next church service or whatever, if you've never actually thought to set aside dollars for that, you'll never have it. And you think, man, I wish I could go on that. We just don't have the money for it. Or something along those lines that God's laid this vision on your heart. Maybe it's to give a season of your life in a way where you know you're not going to make very much money.
Yeah.
And so you are able to work towards that because you're seeking the Lord in that. And that's what a lot of us never do when we look ahead is in terms of finances, we just don't pray about it. We don't ask God for his wisdom and guidance. And it does also mean anticipating expenses, but it's not just that. So yeah, that first key there is really looking ahead.
And really when we talk about looking ahead, it's good for you, especially if you're married, to sit down and have your dreams, big picture dreams. Who do we want to be as a family? If we don't have kids, who do we want to be when we have kids?
Yeah.
Right? Do we want one of us, do we want somebody to stay home with the kids? Or, what does that lifestyle look like? And you can plan now. Who do we want to be after the kids leave the house?
Yeah.
Who do we want to be in retirement? What are our priorities? And looking at life through those lenses really gives you a goal to go after and puts things in priority. Because if you're looking ahead to the future, maybe you will say no to some of the things that are kind of meaningless and pointless because you have a bigger picture in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And giving yourself permission to seek the Lord and not the culture on this.
Yep.
Because sometimes the culture is going to feed you with things that are not necessarily the way God is leading your life. And I'll give you one example, and I know it's a very touchy subject. And so staying at home. When Jesse and I got married, we both worked, and then we felt like she wanted to stay at home. I wanted her to stay at home with our kids, especially when they're in those younger ages, and to be able to invest in those relationships in that way. Didn't mean we looked at other Christian couples who didn't do that with any sort of judgment.
Yeah.
You need to follow the Lord in that and the way he leads, but it cost us.
Man.
It cost us a lot in terms of 2 incomes going down to 1, and the Lord provided all through that. And we got to experience his grace and his provision and all of those things. But it was rough from month to month in some ways, but the value was so worth it because of the relationship we got to have. That was how we felt the Lord leading in our family. And so you got to look ahead and go, okay, Lord, what do you have for us? Yeah. What do you want? And then choose to follow his ways in that.
It is very rare that you will stumble into the right decisions.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it.
Yep. Okay, number 2 important key is create a realistic, goal-oriented budget. There's the budget word again.
Yes, so the budget is so much fun because none of us like to be restricted, right? None of us like to live in a way that is where we have to tell ourselves we can't have things, right? But that's what a budget does. A budget actually, on the end of it, it gives you freedom. And that's what you were talking about just a moment ago in terms of spending, because you're like, oh, we have these dollars. We can spend them on just having fun and what we want to do. But you only get there when everything else is taken care of.
Correct.
And so you have to create a realistic, and again, with intentionality, goal-oriented budget. So it's not just you look at everything and you're like, okay, we started with X amount, now we ended with 0, everything's spent. Like, what's the goal? Where are you aiming toward? And there are great resources out there with all of this that, I mean, people used to put cash in envelopes so they knew what was going where and all that kind of stuff. That's probably not so much for today. You don't really have that much cash. But the idea is that you've got a spreadsheet or something that you say, okay, here's what's coming in this month. Here's what we know is going out. We're estimating what we're going to spend on groceries, on gas, on insurance, on all this stuff, so that you, again, we used this illustration earlier, you put a name on every dollar, right? You know where it's going, because then with that intentionality, you can really enjoy living within that budget.
And then that's the last key. Actually live in what you're setting.
Yeah.
Right? And that's important. If we don't put our budget into practice, it's really never going to work. If we don't actually follow through with those plans that we looked ahead at, we'll never arrive where we want to be.
Yeah.
And it's defeating in some ways.
It is. It's when you spend all that time and energy working on a budget, and then you get to the point where you're like, now that just goes into the file in the computer and never actually makes a difference in your life. And here's the other thing, especially if you're married, there's so much freedom in conversations and lifestyle when you live on a budget, because you both are there together and you know where everything's going, and you know when you can say no to each other and to yourselves. And it's okay because you have this all worked out. Yep. And it really it helps stop a lot of conflict in your marriage when you get to live that way. Absolutely. Especially when you're married, one of you's typically going to be a spender, me, and then one of you's going to be a saver, which God bless my wife as a saver. We would be in the poorhouse if it weren't for her. And doing a budget together brings those two personalities and priorities together for a really healthy thing, because there is excess to saving, and there is pitfalls on either side. Yeah. It's really easy to see the excess in spending and how dangerous that is. Yeah, absolutely. But there are dangers really on both sides. And so it takes a balance. If you're single, then you're going to have to, work that balance yourself, or have people in your life that you can have these conversations with that will help you balance those things, knowing your own tendencies and saying, okay, here's kind of the rudimentary budget I put together. What am I missing? And being able to have that open conversation with somebody is really healthy. Yeah, absolutely. I do that with my sister, for instance. She is single, and she saves every dollar she has. And I'm like, you need to go have fun. Yeah. Anyway, just kind of wrap some things up here. 1 Timothy 6:20 says, "O Timothy, guard the deposit entrusted in you." Yeah, so that's not talking about money specifically there, but it uses money language to once again bring us back to, even though we've been talking about the very practicals of how do you consider resources, how do you consider money and all of that, really, you don't and you can't separate just this one aspect from the rest of our lives. And so what Paul challenges Timothy to do in that letter, to pursue righteousness, to pursue godliness, to pursue faith, to pursue love, to pursue steadfastness, to pursue gentleness, to take hold of the eternal life to which he was called, and to stay unstained from the world and free from reproach. And understanding that, I love that, because it reframes the money conversation to where it puts it all in our walk with Christ. It really comes back to abiding in him and using those simple principles then to walk in a way where even the dollars that we have are intentional towards his kingdom. That's so good. Let's go ahead and close this one out. I know that's a lot to walk through, but it is so healthy for us to have these conversations. And again, to go back to what we talked about in the session before this, seek first the kingdom of God. For where your treasures are, there your heart will be also. Just to kind of mesh all of that Matthew 6 together in a statement. It's good for us to take stock of these things and to live in a way that really follows in obedience to what God has really given us. So here's some questions for us as we kind of wrap this up. What areas of stewardship
need most attention in your life right now? Do your financial habits reflect trust in God, or do they reflect a trust in yourself? That one's a hard one.
Yeah.
Man, I got slapped with that one in the face a couple of years ago, and I was humbled to my knees big time. It's a good question. And then another question is, what steps do you need to take towards living a right side up lifestyle? So that may mean you need to set priorities. Either yourself or you and your spouse need to set priorities on what matters to you and how are you going to get there. If you don't have a budget, you need to start one today.
Yeah.
And you also need to live by it too.
Yeah.
But it's just, again, it's life-giving to do a budget, which it doesn't feel like it. I understand, but it is so good for us, because then it allows us to ask this question: how can generosity become more of a natural part of our rhythms?
Yeah.
And man, there is goodness that follows when we live generously for his kingdom.
Yeah. And we'll talk in the days ahead more about generosity, but I love that picture of thinking about people that you may respect in your life because of their generosity.
Yeah.
You can be there one day.
Yep.
And it's really putting these practical things into place that you can get to that point.
I think it's good to remember God has entrusted you with more than just money. He has entrusted you with influence, opportunity, time, and gifts. And we get to steward them well for his glory and for the good of others, right? The Old Testament talks about that all the time. All of Scripture talks about that. It's not just for us. It's for all those around us too.
Yeah.
So begin where you are. That's my encouragement. Wherever you are, just take that first right step. Honor God with what you have and trust him for what you need to move forward. Any other thoughts before we finish?
Yeah, I think it's good.
Okay. We'll see you guys on the next episode. It's been a good one.
See you then.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. Our deepest desire is that you would know Jesus and walk with him daily. If you want to know more about what that might look like, you can text PH Life to 77411. If you'd like to know more about Parkway Hills, visit our website at parkwayhills.org. We'll see you next time on the Resolved Podcast.